I was born in Alexandria of Greek parents. Alexandria was founded by Alexander the Great, and following his death, it was governed by Ptolemy I. Alexandria wasn't just the capital of Egypt, but along with Athens, one of the world's most cultural cities. Its grandiose library was undoubtedly one of its most famous monuments, and the new library has been built in the same place as the old one, with the aim of reenacting its important role in the spreading of culture and science. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Its construction, which was started by Ptolemy I, it was completed during the reign of his son Ptolemy II. Different earthquakes throughout the centuries led to the final destruction in 1303. Kite Bey used the remains of the lighthouse to build a fort in 1480. Alexandria reached its peak of glory as a cosmopolitan and cultural center from the period between the 2 world wars up through the 1960s. Greeks were the largest minority in Alexandria, and they lived in perfect harmony with the local population. Konstantinos Gavafis, one of the most famous poets of the 20th century, lived in Alexandria from 1863 to 1933.
Perhaps more than any other Greek poet has been translated into different languages. It has also been recited by Charlotte Rampling and Sean Connery.
After the attack on the Suez Canal by the English and the French, Nasser asked all the foreigners to leave Egypt.
All our estimations were based on the idea that Britain will not participate with any attack.
His decision was based on the supposition that England would not attack Egypt, a fact which later proved to be wrong. In the 1960s, the Greek community, who had played no part whatsoever in the war, was forced to leave. This photo was taken from the balcony of our apartment a day before my final departure for France. Kite Bey's fort can be seen in the distance. It was the last time I ever saw Alexandria. Here I am, so many years later, returning to the Angers station. The first time I went through this door, I was only 16 years old. This was my first stop from Alexandria. Here I studied at the Angers Fine Arts School. I feel very emotional crossing the courtyard again after such a long period of time. I had arranged a meeting with Yves Orillon, who was a fellow colleague of mine when we were both studying. He's now a teacher teaching at the school. It was within these workshops that I was taught the meaning of the divine proportion. Studying the old masters as well as the contemporary ones in the history of art shows us that styles of painting changes, but that the golden section is immovable, giving the paintings where the golden section has been used another dimension. Outside of school, during this period, I did a series of paintings whose only aim was innovation. At 18, I was influenced by modernism. My aim was to create paintings never seen before. What self-delusion! I started to stretch canvases on unusual geometric frames which were in some areas empty. I made these frames myself as they were not available on the market. It was a totally original idea for that time. The distinction between the past, the present, and the future is only a surprisingly persistent illusion. This explains why the old classical painters are often more contemporary than the contemporary artists. My primary and secondary education had taken place in the English school in Alexandria. Angers played a very important role in my life. At 16, I began studying in the Fine Arts School, history of art, sculpture, painting. At the same time, I was fascinated by the tapestry of the Apocalypse, which can be found in Angers. even though being opposite to contemporary art. My admiration was indeterminable. It may have been the mystic or eschatologic side, but it definitely played a very important role in my work later, like a time bomb waiting to go off. The castle of King René, where the tapestry of the Apocalypse is kept, is found at Angers in the Maine-et-Loire region. This tapestry dates back to the Middle Ages. The way it is expressed, its perspective and its design is inspired from Byzantine icons. It's one of the most well-known and biggest tapestries that exists, its length being 130 meters. When we look at the tapestry, we may contemplate its meaning. There are different ways to interpret it. In the Apocalypse, the number 7 recurs often. 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 battles, 7 visions and the dragon with the 7 heads, etc. According to the Hermetics, man is made up of 7 levels: the purely physical, the ethereal, the emotional, the specific part of intelligence which is concerned with material things, the abstract intelligence which connects with, for example, our conception of God, the archetypal part, and finally, the deistic part. The Apocalypse shows us bit by bit how to control the 7 parts of our existence so as to finally arrive at the revelation that we are actually creatures of light. The basic colors of the tapestry are blue, red, white, and green, colors that we can find in works by alchemists in phases of black, white, and red.
Immediately after his studies at the Fine Art School, Xenos settled in Greece. These were the years of youth, when art was for art's sake, a time when his work hasn't yet taken into consideration the dimension of others. His only aim was to become one with the landscape. He does a series of paintings with the subject doors and windows. 2 strong symbols which join up the inside and the outside world. These almost abstract landscapes are painted freely with broad brushstrokes. Horizontal flat-colored surfaces make up these landscapes, which separate into 2 parts. We will come across the concept of earth and sky, which we will find again later in other series. Let's examine these paintings. After a little while, we realize that the paintings portray a landscape inside the house and that the observer is on the outside of it. In turn, we are invited to take communion with these unusual and universal landscapes which may be found within ourselves.
Χριστός Ανέστη.
Αληθώς ο Κύριος.
In 1967, during the Easter period, a military coup took place in Greece. Xenos is forced to leave Greece and finds himself for the second time in exile. He returns to France and settles in Paris. The dictatorship becomes a turning point and a catalyst for his work. His consciousness and attention is turned towards the others. Shapes and forms, for the sake of it, seems to him as an aesthetic exercise without meaning. He starts a series of huge paintings, 2 by 2.5 meters, which mirror history in the 20th and the 21st century. During this period, he paints the suppressed Greece of the colonels, the slaughter of Smyrna, and the tragedy in Cyprus. The uprising of the students from the Polytechnic School in Athens in November 1973 was the beginning of the fall of the ruthless military dictatorship in place after a coup enacted by colonels 6 years earlier. On the dawn of the 17th of November in 1973, tanks move into the Polytechnic School and the student uprising is drowned into blood. A virtual installation projecting paintings onto the facades of blocks of flats in the center of Athens emphasized the contrast between the glorious past, when democracy was born, and a submissive present under the traitors of nations. Xenos' first big one-man exhibition took place in Amiens in 1974, alongside an exhibition by Picasso. An article in the newspaper Le Courrier Picard wrote, "At the Cultural Center in Amiens, the young painter Theo Xenos is in company with Picasso. Guernica converses with the Greek tragedy."
Smyrna, 1922. The slaughter of unarmed civilians and the genocide of the Armenian people.
This virtual projection shows paintings slowly seeping out of the pores of the pillars of the memorial, which is situated in the center of Berlin. They embrace wholly or partly the shape and the perspective of the pillars. These paintings were first painted in black and white, with the names of the camps written in Gothic letters. After that, many of the paintings were covered with a transparent cobalt blue. Wide brushstrokes cover the letters and the figures. Sometimes clouds, freely painted, symbolize the passing of time. Michel Troche, cultural advisor of Minister Jacques Lang, At an exhibition by Theo Xenos said, "It might seem strange to us that a young artist in 1973 is portraying concentration camps. Is it not possible that we have enough photos, books, and documents of concentration camps? Do we need to paint them as well?" However, as a painter, he doesn't answer to tentative conventions. By lessening but not destroying aesthetic, he shows an unusual caring about his paintings, which make one visually uncomfortable. And it's precisely because Theo Xenos is a painter that this discomfort has a meaning.
Theo Xenos a réalisé une très belle exposition à l'occasion du centenaire sur le cinéma à la mairie du 6e. Elle connut un grand succès et elle servit même, dans le cadre d'une émission réalisée par Frédéric Mitterrand, de décor, en quelque sorte, à une émission sur le centenaire du cinéma.
À quel moment avez-vous senti que les Monty Python allaient connaître un succès mondial? Et est-ce que vous l'aviez imaginé avant?
Now, I don't think we ever thought it was going to be that popular. I mean, our great heroes were the Goons in England. They did a radio show called Goon Shows. Peter Sellers was one of them. And we thought it was going to be a good show and it was going to be funny. But I don't think any of us ever thought that we'd still be watching it 25 years later.
Vous allez m'aider à résoudre une énigme à laquelle je suis confronté depuis le début de cette soirée, puisque nous appliquons à ce programme un mot d'origine américaine, anglaise, le mot slapstick. Or, je crois que vous savez ce que cela veut dire.
Oui, il n'y a pas très longtemps d'ailleurs. Et c'est la batte d'arlequin. Slap, c'est la gifle, et stick, c'est le bâton.
Grâce à vous, l'encyclopédie des termes du cinéma peut maintenant être consultée tranquillement et nous pouvons savoir ce que signifie slapstick.
The town lights shine on the first roles on stage. Behind these glamorous facades, which help us to dream, the modern legends are waiting for us. At this moment, the stars fill our eyes with their holy flame. The tiny lights are lit by our desire for eternity. Light. The screen is covered with gold dust, with self-delusion.
They are not posters, but a virtual installation on the facades of cinemas. The portraits of the film stars are mostly in black and white, painted on canvases 60 by 50 centimeters. These paintings are mounted onto other larger canvases.
This installation is in 3 parts: paintings, neon lights, and soundtracks. The portraits of the stars are purposely painted in black and white to make them look like photos on shiny paper. In spite of the photographic realism, the portraits give off a deep inner strength. These portraits are mounted on large canvases showing facades of retro buildings where the tiny electric and neon lights make it look like modern Baroque. multiple interpretations are hidden behind these superficial appearances of the Baroque facades. Technique and aesthetic are just a cover-up and provide a first interpretation onto which the collective memory is grafted. Clouds cross in front of the facades and the portraits of the stars giving a sense of time and ephemeral. There's a contrast between the facades and the blue starry background between human exaltation and eternity. On film, important roles become human stories. Through these snapshots taken in a 24th of a second, he awakens us to encounters with actors who, in shadows behind the screens, have revealed to us almost everything about ourselves. Xenos imprints these faces in the pages of history. From an early age, Theo Xenos understood the contradictions which surrounded him. He enjoyed a comfortable childhood in a luxuriant city whose population was dragged down by illiteracy and poverty. The priests of ancient Egypt have gone forever, and also the famous philosophic schools of Alexandria. Only the ruins from the past are left, and the population which struggles to survive. Xenos' first paintings, with the theme hunger, take their inspiration from Egypt, and then after that from India and Africa. This gives his work a worldwide dimension. Theo Xenos creates a series of paintings representing people with thin, elongated members and huge eyes which devour us. They are painted in black and white from photos and placed next to colored food from consumer advertisements. Ancient India was divided throughout the centuries into hereditary castes. The fact that birth is more important than worth lessens the chances of social development. Authentic wooden surroundings, which have been painted red and white, accompany these large paintings, 2 by 2.5 meters. Pierre Gaudibert, the director of Modern Museum in Paris, writes, "Xenos reacts strongly to our blindness, to the fact that in the magazines, hypnotic advertisements can be found next to shocking and tragic photos of the 20th and 21st century. Sometimes the face of an old man, a woman, or a child takes over the painting, becoming like a detail through a magnifying glass. These intense and perplexed gazes don't understand the world that surrounds them. Theo Xenos is a distant witness to these dramas. The portraits retain their truths, without expressionistic distortions or caricatures, just with a great esoteric intensity which touches us and is automatically transmitted to us. Countries where life is out of balance, with monuments and palaces of uncountable worth, in complete contrast to slums. In this way, Theo Xenos, starting from the everyday and the historical reality, paints as a witness the descent into hell, so as to transcend it even better.
I followed the footsteps of my father, who was a Cypriot. He was very young when he left Cyprus for Alexandria, where he met my mother, who was from Andros, a Cycladic island in Greece. When Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was born, she rose up from the froth of the waves on the beach in Cyprus, in a place with impressive cliffs and rocks called Petra Turomniou, situated a little to the east of ancient Paphos. Homer tells us this story in the Iliad. Cyprus is a small country in the European Union, who is paradoxically divided in half by the Attila line. The northern part of the island was occupied by the Turkish forces in 1974 and since then has been under Turkish occupation. About 170,000 Greeks were pushed out into the southern part of the island and are still living like this, refugees in their own country. Nicosia is the administrative capital of the island, and it is the only one in the world which has been divided into two since the Turkish invasion in 1974. This ethnic eradication pushed me during this period to do this series of portraits.
The author Yorgos Yanaris, referring to the portraits of Cypriot refugees, wrote this about Xenos. I thought I would have left this exhibition unmoved and somehow not responsible. But not only I could not leave, I couldn't even get my own self back. I was engulfed by the chaotic eyes of the refugees whose irises I had to pass through in order to see the light. I knew that, passing through, I would melt, I would alter, maybe dissolve. Xenos stirs the viewer's conscience, holding him responsible in front of the drama of the Cypriot tragedy.
This installation, made up of barbed wire and barrels, was inspired by the Attila line in Nicosia. This virtual installation has been put up in the center of London. Pictures with the theme of Chile and South Africa in size 2.5 meters high by 2 meters wide, painted in black and white. This is the scale of the paintings. Fly to South Africa is the title of South Africa's official advertisement, also used by advertising media. The same virtual installations are projected onto the facades of the block of flats in the center of Johannesburg. In this way, we can underline the dubious relationship between the North and the South, between the rich countries and the poor countries. These paintings, mirrors of this period, are sometimes shown on the pavements. Wooden frames painted red and white accompany them. Europeans only or whites only, benches just for whites. In a dark place of pain, young Africans find themselves behind the bars of apartheid. 9 African men, full of strength and youth, are forced into a body search. 9 victims raise their arms towards a very promising, bright and white beyond.
La mairie du 6e a eu encore le bonheur de réaccueillir Theo Xenos dans le cadre des différentes manifestations qui eurent lieu un peu partout dans le monde à l'occasion des Jeux Olympiques d'Athènes. En France, ce fut la seule manifestation, l'exposition réalisée par Theo Xenos à la mairie du 6e, qui illustra par ses toiles les Jeux Olympiques d'Athènes.
Carved and chiseled by the human spirit and smoothed by the precious passing of time, these gorgeous marble-colored stones bring a continuing and very important message of truth and peace, a message that we will follow forever. These artistic erosions, products of the human mind, invite us to take note of mistakes from the past. Emerge, these human stones tell us about the infinite resources of life. Clearly, willpower shapes history and new ideas are imprinted forever. In a place bathed in the light of the gods of the universe. Pythagoras likens Tetratis to the oracle of Delphi. Tetratis gives us self-knowledge and universal knowledge, both earthly and divine. According to Pythagorean symbolism, Tetratis includes total knowledge. Tetratis signifies perfect balance, the beginning of everything, the god of harmony, who precedes the birth of all beings.
History shows us that mankind needs centuries to build a civilization, but can destroy it in no time. This work was inspired from different dictatorships around the world. The subject is not Greece, but the birth of democracy and its fragility.
For the first time in the history of man, we vote with black and white pebbles, which are placed in jars, ballot boxes. This timeless installation is made up from pebbles, bases from plexiglass and mirrors, a transparent ballot box, and pictures which symbolize the birth of the West. The water, the wind, and even the anger of the sky and the earth, none of them will succeed. Immutable, these messages will never return to dust. Engraved in our hearts, these images will protect us forever against the madness of men.
Following the fall of the Berlin Wall, I created a series of paintings based on period photographs. The memory of the wall is of great interest to me. Memories of a nation forcibly divided into two political systems, families who were split into two by the Iron Curtain. So many tears mixed in with the graffiti, a witness to human pain and weakness. Angry graffiti without hope. However, in 1989, people became determined to break down the wall, to break the back of political fanaticism, which existed on both sides. A small light of hope was reflected on the pavements of Berlin. The wall cracks and then falls. With the fall of the wall, an unexpected union of opposites takes place in Berlin.
When we stroll down sidewalks across the world, we see Xenos paintings unfold before us, revealing not only the memory of a lifetime, but also the memory of world history. Long before hyperrealism became fashionable, the photographic effects, which were not accepted by the critics at the time, were already a part of Xenos' vision and artistic touch. Man builds his cities. Time covers them up at its own speed without rush or anxiety. How many cities exist, buried on top of one another?
There are many ways to interpret this tapestry. The first possible interpretation may be historical. In other words, the history of the First and Second World Wars. The second interpretation is futuristic, that which will happen to humanity if it continues down the same road. Third interpretation, an idealistic interpretation, to do with, for example, the fight between good and evil, when of course good triumphs. There is also another way to understand the Apocalypse of St. John the Evangelist. Apocalypsis is a Greek word which means revelation. The Apocalypse invites us to decipher all the symbols which can be found inside us. A wise Swami said, "An unsuspecting man sees himself as a point lost in the universe, but a spiritual man knows and feels that the universe is a point which can be found inside of himself." The Wall of China is the largest ever man-made construction and is around 6,700 kilometers long. It's a Chinese military fortification which was built in phases between the 3rd and the 17th centuries, but which, however, did not manage to halt the invading Mongolians. Can the ideas of a Western democracy be stopped by a huge war? The revolt in Tiananmen Square proved not.
Walking along the pavements of one of the largest cities in the world, life unfolds in front of us. The fronts of the large buildings are covered with advertisements and neon lights, which entice us to become consumers. Prosperity, a way of life for the modern person. The red and white ribbons symbolize man's unending toil, which has no beginning and no end. Theo Xenos paints reality without beautifying it. For him, Painting must show a correct vision of the world regarding precision and justice. In the eyes of one person, the other one is a fanatic, as unfortunately, people are unable to recognize their own weaknesses. Xenos suggests that we should look in order to hear.
This time the virtual installation, its theme, the black musicians, can be found in the center of New York. The paintings are projected onto the buildings of this megalopolis.
Very fine. Oh, don't fall.
The technique is the same as that of the series of paintings with the theme of the cinema. The portraits of jazz musicians are painted on small canvases 50 by 60 centimeters and then attached onto larger canvases.
This work was shown on CNN and then by Daniela Lombroso on LCI.
Theo Xenos, lui, il expose à l'UNESCO donc des grandes toiles 2 mètres sur 2 mètres 50 juxtaposées ensemble et qui constituent donc une grande fresque. L'idée, c'est de dénoncer l'intolérance et de participer à cette année que l'UNESCO a voulu placer sous le signe de la tolérance.
Oui, c'est cela. Disons que j'étais invité par l'UNESCO à exposer un travail de mémoire, on peut dire, un témoignage.
Under UNESCO's initiative, the United Nations declared the year 1995 as being the year of tolerance, with the aim of alerting public opinion to the danger of peace caused by bigotry between races, communities, and people.
In Rome to modern paintings on show in Paris. Stay with us. There's lots more to see here on CNN World Report. UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Cultural, and Scientific Organization, just wrapped up a year of special events. UNESCO Television reports on one of them.
Recently, UNESCO hosted an exhibition of works by Greek painter Theo Xenos. The exhibition was part of a series of events in 1995 to mark the United Nations Year for Tolerance. It's meant to shock viewers into thinking in terms that they wouldn't normally. Gentle images are suddenly transformed into troubling images, but Xenos' work is nevertheless optimistic, with backgrounds of blue skies signifying hope.
This installation is composed of a fence painted white and red. Behind the fence we can see black and white paintings representing wars, famine, racism and intolerance. Big blue skies appear as spiritual symbols of eternity. I think that tolerance can give mankind new hopes.
Theo Xenos started exhibiting his work in 1965. He hasn't stopped since. All to spread the ideal of tolerance and a culture of peace throughout the world because, as it is written on Theo Xenos' canvas, from tolerance, hope is born. This is UNESCO in Paris for the CNN World Report.
Tapandari, said Heraclitus, everything flows in the universe. Everything is flux and continually changing. Changes are incessant. Man tries in vain to achieve stability, which is swept away by a spiral of perpetual movement. In front of this construction site fence, a newspaper, the echo of everyday life, a symbol of the transitory and politics, is whipped away by the wind and flies up into the sky, between human endeavor and eternity.
The passing centuries have molded these trees into perfection. The wrinkles, knots, and cracks reveal their age on their trunks. Their wounds are sometimes so big that they resemble the cyclops' eye through which one sees the sky, the sea, and the rocks. Their twists and turns stand up to the ravages of time, reminding us of tight hugs and erotic embraces. The bark of the olive tree is alive. Under a magnifying glass, it becomes like a wonderful abstract painting. The old roots, worn out in the darkness, sometimes sprout up again from the ground. In that way, they offer humanity to a tree which, bent and tired, looks as if it's marking time in the shade of branches with their light foliage. If the body of the olive tree exudes passion and erotism, the smooth silver leaves suggest peace. Listen to the silver leaves playing in the wind. They sing Apollo's music, which is a combination of a song, instrumental music, and dance. Magic rules. The spirit sinks into the world memory. Olive trees live for centuries. Don't we call them centurions? Their memories are hundreds of years old. Civilizations, kingdoms, wars, and hopes have passed. In ancient times, magical and mystical places helped to lead to their discovery and their development. Sophocles said, "Here he plants the blessed tree, the olive tree, with its emerald colors." It became a world symbol. Andros is, for Theo Xenos, the place where he returns to his roots. And more specifically, the roots of the holy tree where he drew his first drawings. He painted the olive trees from his garden and the surrounding area. The drawings were used for paintings of the trees with their contorted trunks almost like human bodies. Bright rays of sun pierced their foliage, and a strong duality was created between the light and the olive trees. The directness of the rays is in contrast with the curling shapes of the trees. The trunks in the paintings were replaced over time with sculptured trunks. This installation is made in 3 parts. Tree trunks made from recycled material in the form of a sculpture, paintings of the foliage, and sculptures made from baked clay. These thin, oblong sculptures function in a vertical position as axles, on the top of which a flame burns slowly, at its own rhythm, adding to the whole a sense of being lost in time.